Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. But the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy.
The Democratic Socialists are back in the spotlight, and once again, Bill Maher is tearing their arguments apart with surgical precision. This time, it all kicks off when Bernie Sanders reignites his crusade to tax the rich. But Maher isn't playing along. He flips the script in the most savage, no-holds-barred way possible. If you want sharp, unfiltered political commentary, hit that subscribe button because this one gets intense fast.
An economy, to me, I know I've said this before, I still don't get it. Last week was tax day, and as usual, because HBO is so generous, and I'm sure so will be the new owners, I paid to the government, if you add in state tax, local sales, property, fees, Obamacare, probably almost 60% of what I earn. That's a lot. And I still wouldn't mind if Bernie Sanders would stop saying the rich don't pay taxes. And while I'm sure the super rich with their army of accountants and corporate loopholes get away with murder, us regular rich people pay a shit ton of taxes. And who stands up and gives us a pat on the back? Nobody, that's who.
Maher comes out swinging, and he doesn't waste a second. No theory, no fluff, just a direct hit. He uses himself as Exhibit A, pulling in around $10 million a year. Maher claims he's already handing over nearly 60% in taxes. Think about that. More than half gone. So when Sanders argues the wealthy aren't paying enough, Maher's reality tells a very different story. If someone at his level is already losing 60 cents on the dollar, the question hits hard: how much is fair? It's a direct challenge to the entire Democratic Socialist narrative.
The top 10% pay 72% of all federal income taxes, and the bottom half, 3%. The Democratic Socialists talk about socialism like we don't already have a lot. Social Security, unemployment, Medicare, nutritional assistance, Medicaid, Obamacare, disability, housing subsidies. Again, not against it, just the same question. How can you be soaking the rich and failing the poor so badly?
And here's where it escalates. Maher pushes the claim even further, suggesting the real tax burden can climb as high as 72%. Let that land. Nearly 3/4 of income gone. Yet despite all that, the outcome isn't matching the promise. The bottom half still holds only a sliver of total wealth. Millions remain stuck below the poverty line, even after massive government spending. So the question becomes unavoidable: if the system is taking this much to fix inequality, why does inequality keep growing?
Badly that on 60 Minutes last week, they were redoing the story they did 18 years ago about remote area medical. That is the program modeled after medical teams that drop into the poorest countries in the world for a few days to set up a tent where people with no access to health care can get some. And now we're one of those countries. Doctors within borders.
And it's not just the poorest feeling it. The middle class is getting squeezed from every direction. Rising costs, flat wages, less breathing room. What makes it worse? A country that once helped the world is now struggling to stabilize itself. Food banks are stretched. Charities are under pressure. The safety net is fraying, and people are starting to notice
that the federal government alone took in over $5 trillion in taxes last year, and we still need that. Are we really this incompetent and corrupt? Don't answer that. Whatever it is, somehow the ultra-rich keep getting ultra-richer, while a growing percentage is feeling truly desperate. You just wouldn't know it because everyone on TV is rich. Reality TV, rich women day drinking. Drama, rich women whose friend got murdered. Comedy, rich men shouting into cell phones.
Maher's core argument is simple and uncomfortable. This isn't just about taxes. It's about spending. Trillions flow into government every year. Yet the same problems persist. Poverty, homelessness, economic pressure, it's all still there. Look at places like California. High taxes, big budgets, and still facing serious issues. That disconnect raises a tough question. If more money is the solution, why aren't the results improving?
He seems like a nice guy, and I congratulate him on an extraordinary political achievement. But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who before the 24 election said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies? One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a Democratic Socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's...
This is where Maher turns political and direct. He argues the bigger risk isn't just bad policy, it's political damage. The messaging from the far left isn't landing with everyday voters. Workers, business owners, and the middle class feel increasingly disconnected from it. Maher's advice: move back toward the center. Focus on practical issues: safety, affordability, stability. Because when a party drifts too far, voters don't follow, they walk away.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're Democratic Socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
At the heart of it all is a bigger debate. Socialism, as an idea, sounds compelling: fairness, equality, security. But reality has often told a more complicated story. Countries that lean heavily into it have faced serious economic challenges. That contrast between promise and outcome is exactly what Maher is highlighting.
White people sometimes, I think, question some of what you're saying. This is a survey student loan forgiveness recipients. 73% of applicants say they are likely to spend their extra money on non-essential, including vacations, smartphone, drugs, and alcohol. They admitted that to the pollster.
Who is this pollster?
NBC News. 52% they are very likely to buy new clothing. 46% they would use the money for vacation and eat out at restaurants.
And then comes the cultural angle. Maher argues that, at their core, many Americans think differently. Even when people receive government support, their instincts often lean toward building, investing, and improving their own position. That mindset doesn't disappear easily. People don't just want assistance, they want opportunity. And ignoring that distinction could come with consequences.
The kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes.
Maher reinforces his argument with history. Time and again, large-scale economic experiments built on heavy state control have struggled to deliver consistent success. The takeaway: you can't just assume a different outcome without addressing the underlying issues. For Maher, the concern isn't just implementation, it's the structure itself.
I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more.
So that's the bigger picture. Bill Maher cuts straight to a debate that isn't going away anytime soon. Is the problem not enough taxation nor ineffective spending? Why hasn't massive funding closed the gap? And what direction actually works? The middle class feels pressure. Inequality remains. And the political divide keeps widening. The question now is whether leaders adjust or double down. Drop your thoughts below and we'll catch you in the next one.